Oh, again, this is Michael Vanderpool. If you've just seen the video I made before on altered goals transits, this video is as an astrologer. This video is going to be me talking about another Western astrology technique, specifically, however, from Astro, the Swiss-American website out of Switzerland at astro.com. I predominantly practice and do Magi astrology. However, I look at fixed stars astrology and use fixed stars astrology, also Vedic astrology by the books as presented in those books by Pandit Parsai. He was an astrologer for the government of India for 20 years and for the royal family of India for 40 years. His book on Star Guide to Love and Marriage is an awesome, critically important book if you're deeply serious about the astrology of love or marriage. That has nothing to do with Magi astrology, of course, but I only use his work mainly in the sense of the life predictions as far as what he teaches on the planets' placements in the 12 houses of the Vedic Rashi chart and the Vamsha chart. And I use the updated ephemeris from the Magi Society's Magi Astrology Astro Geometry software program to have the most accurate placement of my ascendant sign and of the moon, which made a difference in how the charts were calculated as coming from that, but it moved the moon, in my case, from the 7th house to the 6th house, which is much more accurate to my personality, and it moved the house lords over in one position in the Rashi chart. Also in the Vamsha chart, it also therefore put the ascendant into another house. So those left most of the planet placements in exact where they were originally calculated by the Vedic. However, it did change the position of the moon, and it changed the house lords, which made it even more accurate and made many more accurate points on the Vedic Rashi and the Vamsha chart using Pandit Parsai's book on life predictions based on where the planets are in the houses of the Rashi chart and the Vamsha chart, the house lords there, of course. So what I'm talking about today, however, is a Western astrology technique as specific to Astro.com, the Swiss-American website. So that is a transit that they originally used to label and name enemies around every corner. Now it's like excessive energy or excessive, energy and different descriptions of that kind, but the description's still the same. The enemies around every corner transit is what it used to be called, and that is still part of the description of what is when transiting Chiron applies square to natal Mars. And whether that transit is 2 weeks or whether it is a time from, let's say, September into April of a year, that's the two different lengths that I recall seeing them in my life. And at one point it was when I had a marital separation and there were enemies. Either she acted as an enemy or the people or some of the people around her or the situation acted in enemy intrigues or in enemy actions. So if you go back to my previous video on altered goals transit, another Swiss American Astrodyn's Western astrology technique, and you go over that video, which is about almost around 17 or so minutes in length, that will give you the information you need to really get more benefit in what I'm presenting and sharing with here. Enemies around every corner can be a short length, as I mentioned. In my personal experience, it was when I had a separation and marriage in which there was enemy action against me, enemy intrigue and enemy action against me. It can be the kind of length where, you're in a foreign country, for example. Like I was in Russia for the second time, for example, and there was definitely enemies around every corner, and there was definitely some intrigues against me. That's the fact. Now, in addition to that, however, I was back in the United States, and right there at home, right there in Missouri, I was at my brother's house. There was a situation where there was something that should have been corrected that wasn't being corrected, and there was a girl there that was a temporary situation, and she was connected with my brother at the time, and it was her. She made an intrigue. She made the enemy action, and I simply was, across the street then on, and there was a project, a rental house project they had that lasted for months, a couple of months at least. And so, but it resulted in her lying and intrigues against me, because and she didn't stay in the situation very long at all, and she wasn't directly connected to me. She was connected with my brother, and so she was involved in sort of some intrigues and some lies, and making involved in a kind of a false story that she was creating, and it wasn't about me. It was me confronting her about that situation that was unconnected to me. So but it resulted in her in a confrontation. So, but that's why, because I had kind of more or less called her out on that, and it didn't have anything to do with me at all. It had to do with my family. It had to do with that situation. So, but it resulted in her making these intrigues against me. And that's the kind of energy that you can have. You can have the kind of energy where you have someone's moving against you. They've either planned it in advance, and they're taking this plan of intrigue, of enemy action against you, false allegations, false story, or you might be confronting them where they're involved in a false story, or involving those close to you, like other family members or something like that, or friends or whatever. It can involve approaches from people that want to use you for something, or get involved in, and they are actually working not with your best intentions in mind. They're actually working against you, that kind of thing. So again, if it's tied into the same window of time that you've got a looped heartbreak astrology transit, or a looped harsh heartbreak astrology transit as seen and identified using Magi astrology, which is a part of Magi astrology, M-A-G-I astrology, or if it's around the time, once again, you've got Jupiter square Sun, for example, which could involve legalities or authorities, or legal, like court action or something like that, or the need to consult with a lawyer, or some kind of legal involvements, things like that. Then you'd want to take double notice and take a lot of thought into those things running at the same time together, because it can be that somebody's planning or making intrigues against you, or moves against you in such a way that it can involve lawyers or court, or even the law, or something like that. And I can't say that it involved that in a couple of the situations that I saw this play out, but it's something to note. So, and you might even be able to prevent it. Who knows? You might be able to minimize damage from that kind of thing. I'll give you another example outside of my own personal experience. I had warned someone about them having this transit, and what took place was that they were sold on a business, and they signed a contract, and I warned them not to do any of that kind of stuff under this energy, to be careful about enemies, but they were completely deceived by a real criminal that had a record of fraudulent acts And not only was this person a victim of that, but another couple of people were also taken advantage of. They were also a victim of what ended up being fraud, really. And specifically, it involved a contract that was basically a fraudulent kind of contract. But had they had checked that contract with the lawyer first, you see, if they had it reviewed before signing it and before making an investment with this person who ended up later, they would find out had a number of convictions for fraud, they could have avoided that, the result of that energy, which is enemies around every corner. It's somebody that they were taken advantage of. They were sold on something that was never intended to be anything other than a ripoff, to be cheated. So that's another way that the enemies around every corner transit can play out. It can play out as you're being cheated on a contract. You're being cheated on a business investment, on a business deal, on a business offer, on a partnership. Not only, someone taking advantage of another family member or something that is in the family, or, like somebody coming from a foreign government and trying to use you in a certain situation that's not for your best benefit, but for theirs, and so on and so forth. So these kinds of things can play out in a few different ways that I've seen in real life, but be aware that it could play out in other ways that I haven't seen yet or heard from other people that that have told me from experiences in their lives. When the transiting Chiron is applying square to natal Mars, whether it's 2 weeks or whether it's from for example, September until April, that is an enemies around every corner transit. That is when you may have enemy actions or intrigues made against you. So there may be people coming to you that are spying on you, that are trying to get information out of you to use against you later, or just figuring out how to try to sabotage your life. Or there may be somebody actively involved with a family member, for example, and they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, and it's a little bit of a shady thing, and then you try to confront them or try to begin, then you get the blame and you have to exit the situation temporarily, that kind of thing. It could be that people, for whatever reasons, whatever the scenario, especially with family or loved ones, but even alone, they may be making intrigues or attempted sabotages or plans against you, and that's enemies around every corner transit. And it's an astrology technique, Swiss American website, Swiss American astrology on the website astro.com. And once again, it is when transiting Chiron applies square to natal Mars. So if you want to know other details about how I use the astrogeometry, the most excellent, most professional, most accurate, up-to-date professional astrology software in the world from the Magi Society, Magi Society, in taking this technique or the other technique and trying to determine not only most accurately when it's taking place, but some factors that may play in as to the strength, specifically 3 different factors that I've observed, that I've identified with the altered goals transit, for example, of transiting Mars applying square to natal Neptune. Then go back and see my previous video, because I'm already at almost 14 minutes almost right now in this video. So therefore, go back and review the first video and pay close attention to the ways that I determine how to know or judge the strength and the impact of the altered goals transit. Now, how much of that will apply to the enemies around every corner transit of transiting Chiron applying to natal Mars will take some of your own research as well. In terms of, for example, whether you're going to even find it in heliocentric sky versus geocentric sky, and in terms of being able to find it there in proximity or not, that kind of thing. I'm not going to tell you that. What you have to do is research that part of it and find out on your own, because I've already described exactly this in the previous video, and I'll put a link down Altered Goals Transit in the description of this video. If you see it on YouTube, you will find the description and link Altered Goals Transit Michael Vanderpool and the link there, and you can go back and watch that video in detail to find out some possible ways to maybe determine whether it's more impactful. I will close by saying this: when it's longer in length, it is more impactful, the transit. When it is shorter in length, however, it can still be enough to where it breaks, it either can influence to break a marriage or be a factor in a permanent separation in marriage. Now, I've seen that. It can be enough to be where someone gets cheated by someone that comes in with a contract offer and they have had 13 convictions for fraud in their past that they would only find out about later, for example. And then there's another person or more that are also cheated. So that person with intention had cheated people on business contracts. So with that in mind, that's an example. If you're offered a business deal, a partnership, if you've got something going on in your marriage you need to be paying attention to, and you're not seeing the warnings and signs, you're not seeing it clearly for what it is, or taking the real warning that you're given, or seeing the something like a partnership or a contract offer, something like that, and you've got a intrigues around every corner transit going on, or any other kind of offer for that matter, then you want to double, triple, quadruple check it. And if you can, you would want to wait till the enemies around every corner transit is over, so that you don't natalize that into a business agreement or into a signed contract. You would never want to natalize an enemy around every corner transit if you can avoid it reasonably. Sometimes we can't find the perfect astrology. Sometimes there's circumstances that you can't get around it. I understand that. So it's important to, however, study the Magi astrology principle and application of the theory, the Magi astrology theory of natalization, N-A-T-A-L-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N, natal like birth, to birth, to make something new, to make born something new. And when you sign, and all the rules about that, you can especially read from the Magi astrology lessons, the Magi astrology website, or another excellent source is the certified Magi astrologer, Magi, Magi Helena, Helena. She's got some excellent articles on Magi astrology natalization, Natalization. Very, very important concept, and you certainly wouldn't want to natalize enemies around every corner transit into a marriage, which the marriage date is the #1 most important date of all. It is the #1 most important teaching and value in Magi astrology and from the Magi Society, and tons of their research has proven this scientifically, statistically. And you can read more about that from the Magi Society's websites, Magi Society's lessons, and from certified Magi astrologers like Magi Helena or Magi Kevin. Make a great choice. And I also love Magi Betty, that's B-E-T-T-E, her ephemeris and her blog and her website, and it's another certified Magi astrologer. So you can read more about all of these concepts and these things that I've talked about that are in Magi astrology also on their websites. Those two things that I've talked about in the previous video and this video, those two astrology transits that are not Magi astrology, that's just from my own experience, and that's from another website, and Swiss American astrology, Western astrology, which I don't commonly use, but I do use and trust above all and absolutely the astrogeometry software from the Magi Society. And they do have the option to have the some traditional astrology options on there, just so that people can compare and see how inaccurate or less accurate some of the other traditional astrology is. And that's an excellent learning tool, because you will find, especially when they're using the updated ephemeris, like I said, even with the Vedic astrology, it made it much more accurate, but only because I used the updated ephemeris, i.e. Magi Society's astrogeometry software, because it changed the position of the moon in the Rashi chart from 7 to 6, and it changed the house lords over by 1, which made it, instead of, like this much accurate, like this much accurate, the ancient Vedic astrology, 25 generations, father to son, passed down knowledge of Panda Parsai's the Vedic astrology on life prediction. So I do look at that, I do use that, but only that. My primary use, what I find to be incredibly and most accurate in what I'm focused on and using every day practically, is Magi astrology. Thanks for watching. This is Michael Vanderpool. You'll also find a link to my astrology website in the description below. Don't forget to like, share if you like it, and subscribe to my channel. And see my astrology playlist. It's also linked below. There's more than 30 videos there.